And oh, there we go. I'm really excited to be here. And I'm leading today's presentation with Shannon Prey, who you all have already met. Um, we're going to focus on turning your data into effective stories. We're going to, as I said, focus on establishing content, developing compelling narratives, and all of the best parts of storytelling. And really, as everyone mentioned, part two is in December, and I really hope that you'll come back for it. All right, let's just dive right in. So today's agenda is starting with quick introductions. I know that you've already started with some of that. I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself officially, as well as CPEG. I think a lot of you are familiar with our work already. And then we're going to get into the meat of today's presentation, understanding your context. What is explanatory analysis? What is a 3-minute pitch? What's your big idea? And then creating content, how you turn your data into a compelling narrative. So as I mentioned, my name is Sarah Cooper. I am the director of CPEG, the Community Epidemiology and Program Evaluation Group. It's a little bit weird because my camera is over here, but all of you and your faces are over here. So I'm trying to look at you, even though my camera's in the wrong place. I apologize for that. And actually, I snuck out of my office today because nobody lets me do fun stuff like this ever anymore. My colleague Shannon Prey is going to be co-piloting this with me today. She is often a willing participant in a lot of my shenanigans, so I appreciate that. She's going to go ahead and monitor the chat for me because I don't multitask well. And we're going to spend the next 50 minutes watching funny panda videos. No, we're not actually going to do that. We're going to do some fun stuff though. Shannon is probably very familiar to all of you because she's already had a chance to say, yeah, hi, but she heads up our QPR and our EDS data collection. And she provides a lot of wonderful, powerful technical assistance to our grantee partners. I don't know if all of you know this, but she is a crackerjack evaluator and she's a master at data visualization as well. So I'm really excited that she's here with me today. CPEG, for those of you who are more or less familiar with what we do, we are a research and evaluation center at CU Cancer Center and in the CU School of Public Health. We are located on the Anschutz campus in Aurora, and we work with predominantly nonprofits, government agencies, and coalitions to plan, evaluate, and improve programs that advance community health. One of our main responsibilities is to be the external evaluators for Colorado's A35 programs. That's why we know a lot of you already. And we work closely with both STEP and CCPD, and members of our team have served on, for example, review committees for both programs. I see Teresa is here and also introduced herself. I think she's the incoming chair for the Tobacco Review Committee, so kudos to her. That's terrific. One of our strengths, in my opinion, is that we blend both public health research, evaluation, program design, analytics, and community insight to equip the organizations we work with to better understand and improve what matters most to them. Communication is one critical tool that community members and partners use to communicate out their message in a way that suits community needs, partner needs, funder needs, and and leverages information. All right, let's get started. So here's today's icebreaker. Think about what happens in your brain when I tell you to show us your data, right? In the chat, please share one word that describes how this makes you feel, right? We're going to spend about 30 seconds here. So just don't think, just feel and type. And let's see where this gets us. And Shannon, as people start chatting, let's see what they have to say.
Cool,
Excited.
anxious. Oh gosh. Gulp. We've got some readies and some let's goes. I say eek, overwhelmed, ugh, Excited, yay. Zoinks.
I
Warm
like
and
zoinks.
fuzzy. Intentional. Which type of audience?
Great, great. All right.
I think
So
all
the
of those are true for all of us all the time.
Absolutely. I mean, the point of this exercise, right, is simply to say that, some of us come from quantitative backgrounds, like me, right? I collect and analyze data every day, right? I can build models, I can interpret findings. That's kind of my happy place. But a lot of us don't have any formal training in design, right? We have few tools that help us communicate our data to various audiences. And our audiences may not have the same kind of data literacy that we do, right? And the flip side of that is that equally as often, individuals without any technical background at all are being asked to step into analytic shoes and communicate using data, right? Data that they may not feel comfortable with at all, and certainly not comfortable enough to explain and interpret to others, right? So when you look out at the sea of faces here on Zoom with us today, I mean, we are all uncomfortable with some aspect of this process, right? None of you is alone, right? And so finally, the point here is to say that please ask questions. Please stop me in the middle of presenting something. I mean, if you're curious or confused, most likely someone else is too, right? We are all here with open heads and open hearts. Okay. Thank you so much for that. All right. So where do we start? When we talk about approaching data, there are really only two major phases of analysis. The first one is exploratory, and the second one is explanatory. Exploratory is what you do to understand your data. This is how you figure out what's worth sharing out to other people, right? It's how you find that pearl in the oyster. And this is like a bit of a heavy-handed metaphor because you might have rich, wonderful data with lots of great pearls. The question here is which pearls add to the story you're trying to tell today, right? And really, the rest of today's presentation is actually about how you answer this question. When you're ready to build a data story, you want to be in an explanatory stage, right? You have a specific thing you want to share, right? We've moved past the space where you're showing your exploratory analysis. Now, I totally get it, right? You've done all this work. You want to show your audience everything that you've done, including how robust your analysis is. I mean, your modeling is superb, your errors is small, your linear regression line is super sexy, right? Resist this urge. I'm going to say it again. Resist the urge to show your audience all of your data, right? Concentrate on the information your audience needs to know. Focus on your pearls. We're going to talk about that a lot today, right? Your pearls of data will provide the context for the three most important questions you need to answer before you can build your narrative: your who, your what, and your how. First, to whom are you communicating? So understanding your audience will help you identify common ground and make sure your audience hears your message. Your what refers to what you want your audience to know or to do. And finally, the how is how you intend to share your story and what role data will play to support your narrative, right? Okay. So when I say who, the question I'm really asking is who are you talking to, right? And when I say who are you talking to, I need you to be specific. I need you to avoid general statements like internal and external stakeholders. Like, what does that really mean? Who is that, right? Probably internal and external stakeholders are different people. And different audiences have different needs, they have different desires, different interests, ideas, and definitely different motivations, right? So, how can you effectively communicate with all of them at one time through one communication channel? The truth is, you probably can't, not effectively, right? The bottom line is you probably need to create different communications for these different audiences. And this is okay. That's fine, right? The more that you know about your intended audience, the better you can tailor your message so that it resonates with each of them. The second thing you should think about is, what does your audience know about you, right? How do they feel about you? This seminar is a good example, right? You already know that I showed up late. Am I irresponsible? Am I disrespectful? I don't know. We haven't gotten off on a great start here, right? So I'm working really hard and tap dancing as fast as I can to make this up to you, right? That affects the tone that I'm taking. I'm being maybe overly chummy or overly colloquial, trying to build a rapport between us, right? Have we met before? So you're giving me the benefit of the doubt, right? Am I already a trusted partner? So you know, oh, she's not usually so irresponsible. Something must have gone wrong, right? Do I have to reestablish my credibility, right? Most of you probably don't know me, and maybe you are more or less familiar with CPEG, which was why I started today's discussion with a brief introduction to who we are, right? And then we did an exercise to build relationships through shared experiences, right? If things had gone as they were supposed to today, that would have started us off on a better foot, right? I mean, ultimately, the more you know about your audience, the more you can speak to relationship building, and the more you can tailor your message, then the more likely your audience is to believe you and act on your message, right? Okay. Your what is the message you want to convey to your audience through your communication. What do you want your audience to know or do? Here's a little bit of a warning here, right? If you can't explicitly state what this is, then maybe you need to step back and think about the purpose of your communication. Why are you doing this in the first place, right? And a lot of times this is actually where I start. Sometimes I think about my what in the context of why, right? Am I teaching? Am I providing support? Am I calling for advocacy and involvement? Do I want money, right? Do I want other kinds of support? You know, I work with a lot of brilliant people. A lot of them are a lot smarter than I am. And I'm thinking about one particular person who loves data even more than I do, right? You know, you see her face just light up when she gets to work with new data. In fact, you can actually see it from space. Um, the problem is that she gets so focused on the data that she often misses the message, right? Right? Because she's so focused on the data. She also dives into the analysis before she has a hypothesis and gets so lost in the data that a lot of times we have to send out a rescue party to kind of pull her out. But my message for her is the same as my message for you here today, right? You have to start with that message. Ha ha ha, right? No pun intended, right? The message drives everything else. The data should always be the supporting cast to your message, right? Now, there may be some circumstances where it isn't appropriate to recommend action, right? Does anyone have an example about when this might occur, right? When it's not appropriate to recommend action, but instead present a variety of potential next steps or recommendations? Maybe throw something in the chat.
I would say something along the lines of presenting feedback to participants who already gave, shared, contributed to a study, presenting to a review committee, when the context is rapidly changing.
Those are great examples. Thanks, Shannon. That's exactly right. One of the things that we do is present to the Tobacco Review Committee all the time, and we often present them with a variety of opportunities. Sometimes we tell them, you know, these are our suggested next steps, but here is a range of opportunities for you to choose from. You know, and the opportunity to suggest next steps is a great way to get conversations going because it gives your audience something to react to, right? Something to spark conversation, discussion, debate, right? You really want your audience to walk away with some kind of cue to action. And maybe it's not necessarily action, maybe it's uh, a, a, a thoughtful idea or additional conversation or more fact finding, something that cues them to act, right? On the right side of the slide, I've shared some of my favorite action verbs. A few of them are very simple, like try or start or plan or do. That doesn't mean they aren't just as powerful as collaborate or empower, right? Do is enormously powerful, right? And it's just 2 letters. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about your what. How refers to the communication method, right? How are you presenting your data? How are you presenting your narrative? It also refers to how the data themselves support the story that you're telling, right? I like to think about the various components of how separately. So for me, mode refers to how the information is conveyed to the audience, right? Is it a presentation? Is it an infographic? Is it a data brief? Is it a one-pager? Is it a full-on report, right? Here in the case of a live presentation, I have full control, right? I determine what you see and when you see it. I control the speed of this presentation. I know I'm talking very fast and I'm trying to calm down, and it's going to take me a few more minutes, I think. Um, and I can respond to your questions, right? And I can actually pivot the content in real time if I feel like we're kind of missing the point here, right? Or I'm losing you, right? In a written report or a data brief, I have less control. The audience is in control of how they consume the information. And as a result, I would need to include a higher level of detail because I'm not there to respond to audience cues, right? Ideally, in a perfect world, deliverables and communication strategy would be totally different depending on mode, right? And my choice of mode would depend on the audience, right? We will dive deeper into tone and data in the next seminar in December. In brief, design choices affect how your audiences interpret both text and data, right? Can you think of an example how that might happen? Shannon, I know you know. One way is the use of formal versus informal language, right? Colloquial language sets a more friendly, casual tone, whereas formal language might be more appropriate in a professional or clinical setting. Another way to set the tone of a presentation is use of different backgrounds, color selection, bolding text, font size. There are a whole variety of ways of changing the tone and interpretation of visuals. All right. So, as I just said, please come back in December, and I promise you will learn everything you need to know about leveraging data to support your message. The key takeaway for today is that data are supporting evidence for the story you are telling. They are not the center of attention. I'm going to say that one more time. They are not the center of attention. So while you are crafting your narrative, keep in mind what data can strengthen your case and where they can lend some meat and heft to your message, right? Don't let data drive your what, all right? I know that sounds like we've only spent one slide on it, but that is such an important key element here, right? Your message drives your message, your data support your message, right? Okay, I thought it would be helpful to walk through an example together. I came up with this example of a chronic disease intervention. It's pretty generic, but I hope it can be used as a model for all different types of programs and policy initiatives. And actually, it lends itself really nicely to tobacco programming as well. And as we read this together, keep in mind possible who, what, and how. Okay. Would somebody in the audience like to read the text for us? Just go ahead and unmute yourself and start reading.
You just completed an experimental pilot program to teach multi-generational families about how to adapt culturally relevant recipes using health-forward foods. You surveyed families at the onset and at the end of the program to determine interest in and usefulness of program curriculum and intentions to use skills, perceptions, attitudes, and behavior change. The data show great success, and you would like to offer the program as part of your regular disease management intervention.
That was terrific. Thank you so much. Okay, so now we are going to seamlessly transition to the whiteboard and work on how we operationalize our who, what, and how in the context of that program description. So Shannon's going to help us click onto the whiteboard. And we're going to think about that example and use sticky notes to capture three things. The first is all of the possible who's, all of the possible audiences who might be interested in hearing about that program, right? The second is the what's, right? What are all of the various messages that you might want to share out about that program? And the final one is the how's, right? Looking over your list of who's and what's, right? How might you prefer to share out information about that program? Shannon, can you get us to the whiteboard?
You guys should all see the whiteboard.
Yep,
And
I see it.
yes, if you in the chat, I dropped the link so that you can join us on the whiteboard as well.
We're going to spend about 3 or 4 minutes here.
Hey, Sarah.
Yeah.
Could you repeat the narrative again? Sorry, I will actually admit I wasn't paying attention.
Oh boy. So you just completed an experimental pilot program to teach multi-generational families about how to adapt culturally relevant recipes using health-forward foods. You surveyed families at the onset and end of the program to determine interest in and usefulness of the program curriculum and intention to use skills. So you surveyed them about perceptions, attitudes, and behavior change. The data show great success, and you would like to offer the program as part of your regular disease management intervention. So the ask here is to identify all of the potential who's, the what's that you are most interested in, and your preferred how's, right? So who are the audiences? What are your key messages about the program that you would share? And how would you prefer to deliver the message? Is that good, Teresa?
It is apparently asking everyone is needing permission to use the whiteboard. So why don't you guys tell me in the chat your who, what, and how. And I'm sorry, when I tested it before. So Sarah, I'm gonna unshare. Why don't you share your slides back and we can see your narrative again.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. You're good.
Okay. So we're going to move forward and then we will come back to yours as you all please add your feedback in the chat, what's in your house in the chat. And we can wait here a minute or two while you guys do that. So future funders, absolutely. The organization requesting the evaluation. Yep. the participants themselves. Love that. Right? We don't often think about sharing program information back to the participants, but I think that that is such a powerful thing. At CPEG, one of our primary motivations is helping communities feel empowered through their own data. We do a lot of community-based trainings to help communities understand their data, understand and how to interpret their data. We share back information that we've been privileged enough to collect with communities. I mean, the data don't belong to us. The data belong to the communities, and they own it. Other community members, participants, yep, all of these are terrific. Yep. Something else I was thinking about was the individuals who lead the programs. They probably are very interested in hearing the kinds of impact that their programs have. Other organizations that might be interested in sponsoring programs like this. Any other ideas? All right. Well, so let's move on to. Okay. So this was one of my takeaways, right? And I think that several of you came up with this example yourselves. I've decided here that my audience is a potential funder for the program, right? We have pre-post survey data, right? My what is the program was a success. Please approve our funding request of X dollars to support my program, to support this program. And my how is a slide deck to illustrate program need and overwhelming success. I would like to use the pre-post survey data. And then because this is a community-based, multi-generational program, and because I know I have secret knowledge that my potential funder is a foundation and they really like community-oriented people-forward projects, I decided to add a human impact component to my presentation. So I collected quotes from program participants about the personal impact the program had on their family life and personal health. And also, since the program was multi-generational, I was able to interview families together. With their permission, I was able to add video and audio clips, as well as photographs from the class activities to quotes, which magnified the power of the qualitative data, right? So I allowed the message to drive the data, and I built those data into my how, right? My how didn't drive my what drove my how. I have another example, right? Here's another example, right? From that I don't think that we talked about, but is actually in a lot of the work that we all do is a relevant one. So here the who is potential referral partners, right? Other organizations and other community partners who would refer potential participants into this program. So other clinics, other practitioners, promotoras, community health workers, health navigators, rural traveling nurses, for example. My what is that the program can help your patients take control of their health. So partner with us and refer patients to our program. And the how is a communication strategy to expand referral partnerships. I know several CCPD folks who are already developing a lot of this through their work to expand their referral partnerships. Right? You can see that how many possibilities there are. There's really no right answer here. There's just working through those three questions. Who is your who? What is your what? And how is your how? Right? So now let's pause for a quick message from our sponsor, right? How could I possibly not address the large gold text on the screen here? How do you know your program is a success? Well, hopefully you reached out to your friendly neighborhood program evaluator at CPEG and figured this out before you launched your program. I think somebody put in the chat that one of your who's was the sponsor who wanted to see the program evaluation, and hopefully there was somebody who wanted to see that, but if not, you should be doing your own internal evaluation. um, I've listed 2 robust, reliable strategies on this slide, right? If your program is modeled after an evidence-based intervention, your first step should be to look back at the literature to see what kind of impact and results others have found, so that you know what you might expect to see, assuming some level of fidelity with implementation, right? You always have to keep in mind that programs usually need at least a little bit of adaptation, right? And no 2 participant populations are exactly the same. So you're bound to see some kind of variation in your outcomes. That being said, evidence-based programs typically have enough data behind them that you can confidently say that your program works, right? You know, the other thing to keep in mind is that in the world that we live in, most external funders, especially national or federal funders and foundations, want to see some kind of program specific outcomes data to support your assertion that your program works, right? So when you're developing your intervention, you should be considering evaluation in parallel to program processes and components. So you should be developing evaluation as you're building out your program, right? Identifying key outcomes at the outset allows you to seamlessly integrate data collection measures at every single level of program operations. You can test drive data collection methods. You can pivot when things don't quite work out the way you want them to. And you can also avoid that dreaded, oh, if only we had collected, fill in the blank, right? Great resources for reference and practice are evalco.org. It's evaluationcolorado.org. It's CPEG's evaluation online training platform. If you haven't been there, please go. It's terrific. It teaches you the basics of program evaluation. It also allows you to develop a logic model and a basic outline for an evaluation plan. I've also listed the link to our virtual access point, which has a ton of evaluation resources. Okay, that's enough of a CPEG plug for evaluation. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. So we know who our audience is, we know what we want to convey, we know how we're going to do it. What's the next step, right? So this is where we craft or we refine our narrative. The goal here is to distill down the key elements of our message, right? The challenge that I give you is, can you tell me everything I need to know in 5 sentences? Can you do it in one concise statement, right? Now, you may have already done this as part of your what, right? And if so, great. Here's your chance to refine it, to tighten it up, right? And if you haven't, then this is your opportunity to define your so what, right? Why do I care about what you have to say, right? Here's another quick exercise for all of us, right? Some of you may have done an exercise like this in another setting, right? Where you've introduced yourself or your work in one sentence. I had to do this extemporaneously in at a tobacco researchers conference at Anschutz a little while ago, and it was really hard. So of course I thought that I would introduce it to all of you here today. I don't know, Shannon, do we want to try going back to the whiteboard, or do we want to skip over that exercise and just plug ahead? Oh, wait. All right. Okay, so my challenge to everybody is everybody gets one sentence to tell me everything I need to know about you, right? And I'm going to give you guys 1 minute to do this, right? No pressure.
So those of you who haven't used a whiteboard before, if you click into the whiteboard, there's a toolbar on the left-hand side, and you can choose a shape. You might see that I've just chosen a circle, and I am going to put in here that I am a human that loves
Mhm.
evaluation
Okay.
and cats.
You know, we
It is not letting me give everyone.
you
Excuse
know,
me.
and I want to be a little bit conscientious of time here. So we'll skip over the whiteboard and I promise we'll figure it out next time. Let's just jump back to the slide deck. Can you all see my screen?
No, we cannot right now.
Okay. Hang on just a sec. Okay, how's that? Are we back?
Yes.
Okay, so here's mine. I'm a mother to three magnificent daughters, a committed partner, a passionate and dedicated researcher, a lover of good food, good films, good books, and good company, a consumer of all things sci-fi, an aspiring equestrian, and I like to blow stuff up. You don't need to know anything else about me. That's it. That's me, right? Right? So you know you've mastered your message or your what when you have two things, your 3 minute story and your big idea, right? One way to think about this is an elevator pitch. And I know this feels a little overdone, but it's a useful way to conceptualize your approach to messaging. If you have only moments to convince your audience to take action, what do you say? What's the most essential element that you have to convey to your audience, right? And then can you distill it down to one sentence, right? One articulate sentence that tells me what's at stake. You know, amazingly, something like this actually happened to me, right? It wasn't an elevator, it was an escalator at the Sewell Ballroom. And I was riding up the escalator with a state legislator who I'd been trying to get 5 minutes with for months, right? And I didn't get 5 minutes. I got 45 seconds on that escalator, but she was trapped there with me and I had her undivided attention and it paid off, right? Because I had my big idea. I had my so what in one sentence and I could tell her exactly why talking to me was important and what I needed her to do, right? So the 3 minute story in practice, going back to the same example we had from earlier, right? You can build out your 3 minute story, right? Keeping in mind a couple of key elements, right? First, we need to make sure that the 3 minute story is relatable. Is the issue or program important to you, right? Why? What is it that makes it feel personal or relatable, right? Then you add some detail, right? You might consider this the background or the context section, right? Then you add a little bit more detail. This is where where you would talk about the program. What does it do? Where is it? Who participates? What need does it meet, right? Now tell your audience about your key findings. This program works, and here's the proof. And finally, you finish strong. Here's your call to action. This is where you make your ask. This is what you tell this is where you tell your audience what you want them to do, right? And finally, your big idea, your one sentence, right? Your 1-2 punch, right? Here's the same example, right? Think about how you might distill that 3 minute story down to just one sentence, right? Here's a template that I came up with that seems to be generalizable enough, right? For most programs. The program, initiative, policy, activity, event, you fill it in, was successful at insert accomplishment. And because of this success, we recommend insert your call to action, right? There you go. Boom. Now it's time to turn your message into a compelling narrative. You have all of the important pieces. You have your who, your what, your how. You've used these to create a 3-minute story and a powerful, focused, big idea, right? Now we pull them together into a story, right? Luckily, the rules for effective storytelling are largely the same, regardless of the mode you've chosen to tell that story, right? Right. So how do you set up your story? First, you have an introduction that has a setting, a main character, and some kind of conflict. Then you have the middle part of your story where you develop your problem, you describe what will happen if no action is taken, right? You discuss potential options that address the problem. You illustrate the benefits of your recommended solution. Why is your solution the best? And then you clearly articulate why your audience is in a unique position to drive the action, right? All through this middle section, you should think about what data will strengthen your story. You should align your message with your audience's motivation and then integrate your data where it makes sense. Your story is ultimately about your audience, not about you, right? Your audience and your audience's motivation to act. And finally, the end, right? You bring your story home. This is where you make it totally clear to your audience what you want them to do. Don't beat around the bush. Don't tap dance around it, right? Don't be polite. Tell them what you want them to do next, right? You started your presentation by presenting a problem. You can recap the problem. That's fine, right? The need for action, right? Here you get to underscore the need for urgency and then send your audience off ready to act, right? Sometimes I think about those commercials on Sunday morning television, right, where you see those sad dogs in the chain behind the chain link fences in the snow, right? And the voiceover says, only you can make this happen. Act now, right? Save these puppies, right? I mean, I don't know about you all, but I am dialing that phone. I have my credit card in my hand. That is an effective call to action. It's a little schlocky, but it works, right? So if we shift from schlocky to a little bit more highbrow, right? I read an article by Kurt Vonnegut who shared some thoughts about what he believed were the most critical elements of good storytelling. And if I distilled them down to the 3 key takeaways, they were keep it simple, edit ruthlessly, and be authentic. And I actually said that to somebody just yesterday. And I'm using it myself right now. So, how do you actually build out your presentation, your mode, your story? Well, I like to storyboard. And what does that actually look like? This is what it looks like when I storyboard. If we bring this back to our disease management program example, right? I start with my issue. I make it personal. I start thinking about what data I can add here, right? To really highlight the human impact. Then I share possible solutions and I focus on my favorite solution, our pilot cooking program, right? Then I describe the program, sharing colorful details about location, content, program leaders, community outreach and partnership. I expand on the impact that data can have here as well. Maybe I share some photos of families cooking together in the class. I share a video of families talking about what the classes meant to them, what they learned, how it changed their behavior, and the impact these changes have had on their health. Then I hit the audience with some before and after outcomes data, right? That really hammers home the program's success. And I end with my cue to action, right? Here, this is at the end, right? In the recommendation, right? We need money, right? I put the big idea, right? You can put the big idea at the front. You can put the big idea at the back. The really nice thing about storyboarding is that you can practice it a whole variety of different ways and see how it reads best, right? So the takeaways for today are identify your who, your what, and your how. Find your so what. Write your 3-minute story. Refine your big idea. Storyboard your narrative. Select data to enhance your message, right? And at the end of the day, data should be a tool we use to enhance the message, the meaning, the drive to act. Data shouldn't overwhelm. And most importantly, come to the next seminar on December 9th. No, we ran right up until the very end. Thank you so much, all of you, for sticking with us. These are coming up next. And if you have any questions, I can stay on for a few minutes, or this is where to find us. Thank you, everyone. Apologies for my lateness. Hopefully I made it up to you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Oh, that's all. All right, that's all that's here. Okay. Did anybody stay until the end? No?
Yes, there's a whole bunch of people still here.
Oh, are there a whole bunch of people still here? Oh, okay, yay.
The
All right, if
people-
anybody has questions, please, I'm happy to answer any of them. Throw them in the chat or hop on.
I was just going to tell you, the people were thinking we should have put a Sarah McLaughlin song.
You guys all know that puppy TV show, right? Oh my gosh.
Where you were.
Right.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate your
Oh, no.
insights. And I think that although a lot of us probably do understand and know a lot of what you said, I think it's always great to have those reminders and to challenge us to think in those ways as we're going through our day-to-day analysis work and our I'm sorry, I didn't realize my camera wasn't on. Our day-to-day analysis work and our day-to-day thoughts about our data and about our projects and about what we're trying to present. Stan Zeffler put in the chat early on, who's the audience? And I think the fact that we have multiple audiences gives us the additional challenge of saying, how can we develop some kind of not generic, and then that's really not the word or position I want this to feel like, but develop some kind of broad-based approach to developing a lot of different responses to all of the questions that you asked us. And so I think that part of it, and in still being authentic while you're doing it, which to me is the most important of the three that you had on that slide, still being authentic while you're doing that kind of process is really the key to making sure that the message not only is heard, but acted on, right? So
Right.
thank you so much for reminding us.
No, and I think you bring up a really good point that I think there has to be a really nice balance between generic or broad based, I think is a gentler way of putting that, and really targeted. I think something that one of the things I talked about here was really specifying the audience. One way that we develop broader based communications or slide decks is we'll typically have kind of more approachable information at the front end, and then we will also have more detailed slides that we hide within the deck. And depending on the audience and their interests, we show them or hide them. Right? We also develop reports that way, where it's where they're written a lot like data briefs or executive summaries, and then a lot of the detail, especially the methodology pieces, will be in appendices, so that those people who are, the data wonks like me, who want to know where did all of this come from, can look there and find it, but it's not weighing down the meat of the report itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so there
we do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I know you do. I know you do. Yeah. Thank you so much for your thoughtful comments, though. I appreciate it.
Yep, you're certainly welcome. We'll see you in December.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much. All right.
Take care.
Bye. All right.